I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 195 of Humanity Rising. We've dedicated this whole week to the question of peace. Traditionally, we've understood peace as an absence of war, an absence of violence. That's normally ensured by a show of force that keeps people quiet and subdued. And then somebody somewhere begins the cycle of violence and destructiveness all over again, and the peace is interrupted. As we navigate our way through this extraordinary pandemic, as the world more fundamentally comes together in all kinds of ways, as the processes of globalization knits humanity together at many, many different levels, we need to begin to conceive of peace, not just an absence of violence, but as a proactive engagement for the larger whole, for the greater good, that requires all of us to think about ourselves as instruments of peace. Yesterday, we looked at the issue of peace in relationship to race and culture, focusing on North America, where these issues have been so poignant, thinking of the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis last May. Race and culture dominate the headlines, dominate social relations, and how do we engage peacefully in these very complicated matters? Today, we're going to delve into the issue of trauma and the relationship of trauma to compassion and value economics. And I'm delighted that we're doing this all under the aegis of our chat action group that has come together since the very beginning of Humanity Rising last May, with an energy and enthusiasm and a competence and a capacity that is really transforming Humanity Rising into a living community day by day. So I want to thank all of you in the chat action group and all of you that meet session after session after the session to engage informally. And now to begin our program, I want to introduce Chip Williams, who will lead us in an opening meditation, and then he'll introduce himself. Chip.
Good morning. Let us welcome each other this morning with great respect and with great love. This world that we experience is like a field upon which countless pairs of opposites are constantly at play with each other. We have night and we have day. We have high tide and low tide, full moon and new moon, winter and summer, youth and old age. We have haves and we have have-nots, black and white, gay and straight, good and bad, global north, global south, heart and mind, health and infirmity, and so on, seemingly endlessly. When opposing values interplay within ourselves, in our psyche, in our emotional realm, we can experience tension and conflict within ourselves. There can be layers of nuanced inner conflict where opposing forces stress our thoughts and our emotions. And stress, as we know, is the number one killer the number one destroyer of our well-being and health. Chronic stress is directly associated with the 6 leading causes of death: heart disease, cancer, lung ailments, accidents, and suicide, as well as cirrhosis of the liver. And more than 3/4 of all doctors' visits concern stress-related illnesses. One reason that stress has this debilitating effect upon our well-being is because we identify with our thoughts. We identify with our emotions. And we may even identify with our I am my trauma. I am my problems. But this is not so. Our true self, our innermost self, is always calm, always at peace, and always waiting for us to notice that it is there within us, and it offers us its healing presence. To reacquaint ourselves with our innermost self, we have to turn our attention away from all the things going on outside in the world of our senses. We have to turn our attention back towards its source. Attention has to do an about face. And the source of attention is unadorned awareness, unadorned self-awareness, not awareness of this or that, but awareness of our own self, our own peaceful self. I said that the world is full of a play of opposites. If we can think of a balance beam, and our self is the pivot point of that balance beam. If you think of scales, our self is the point of equilibrium. But we allow our minds to be carried one way or another, and we experience imbalance, and that causes stress for us. So I am going to offer a meditation practice that centers us at that pivot point within our own being, the source and the place of equilibrium within. This meditation is called Soham Meditation. So is Sanskrit for that. Ham means I am. And when we repeat this, what we call natural mantra on our breath, it takes our attention into our heart, and our attention rests there. We say, I am that, because we are not identifying with our problems. We're not identifying with all the tasks that we have to accomplish today. We are identifying with the inner peace, that calm, that open space within ourselves that we never pay attention to. So I'm going to vocalize how this meditation goes, but understand that when you do it, you will be repeating this subtly, quietly with your breath as you inhale and exhale. Again, I will vocalize it, but I want you to quietly do it within yourself. So here's an example. You can relax your body, spine elongated, but not rigid. as if you have a golden thread attached to the crown of your head, gently pulling from the base of your spine. The thread is pulling through the crown of your head and lifting your back gently straight. You can rest your hands on your knees, your thighs, or fold them together on your lap. Close your eyes. And with your exhalation, mentally repeat with your breath, so. And with your inhalation, repeat, so. You will notice that at the end of each exhalation, there's a pause before exhaling. And at the end of each exhalation, again, there's a gap, a pause before inhaling again. That is the space, that is the doorway to our inner self. And we're going to rest our attention in that space, in that gap between each breath. That is our doorway to peace within ourselves, our natural peace. Your mind may chatter, your mind may start thinking of many things, just like your heart beats, just like your lungs breathe naturally, your mind thinks. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not going to fight our mind, but we're just going to take our attention back to the breath and back to the repetition of Soham. Let's take a minute and sit together and repeat that mentally. Okay. That's just a quick dip into the peace that is always available to you by surfing on your own breath into the heart of your own being, where there's always the refuge of peace. My name is Chip Williams. My pronouns are he and him, and I was introduced to trauma in second grade when I was first called a faggot. I now hand this over to Anne Helmke. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Chip, for that meditation. Thank you. I am Anne Helmke. I go by she, her, but Kurt has also introduced me to me, we, and I spend my life talking that way. I was first introduced to trauma by being born into a family of 6 children with 2 older brothers. And now I pass this on to, I believe, David.
I am David. I go by the pronouns he, him. Trauma entered my life at birth with a skin condition. It might also be related to racism. I pass this on to Catherine.
Kurt.
Hello, I'm Kurt. I go by the pronouns mwe. Trauma entered my life in the womb with an identical twin, and it reared its head at 33 on a hijacked airplane, and again at 73 at Saugus High School, mass shooting. I hand this on to Leslie.
Good morning. David, you can turn your camera back on. We still want to see you. I'm Leslie. I go by the pronouns she and her. I first introduced trauma to my identical twin sister at birth when I pushed past her and entered into the world first. My own first introduction to trauma was at 18 when I was raped. Ulf.
Yeah, my name is Ulf. I go under the pronoun. Actually, I'm not sure about going under a pronoun, but I would be a he and I would be an us, because I believe that we are all one and the same and just looking at each other from different perspectives. And trauma entered my life, or I entered trauma on many different levels, because I had to move around in 7 different cultures and reinvent who I was and what I was every step of the way. But I do remember sincerely one morning when we found out that the German Shepherd that had been taking care of me in many of these countries actually died, and they just wanted us to go and get that dog because it was starting to smell. So it was a disrespect for life and death that I ran into that made me think twice and thrice about, what does that really actually mean? After that, trauma has entered my life a zillion times because I see trauma as a safety function, not a disorder. It's something that's there to protect us. And if it didn't visit me every now and then, I would be completely unprotected. So I'm joyfully embracing trauma here with you today. So who do I hand it to?
Kurt.
Well, I get to be able to lead this a little bit because, and it's you can never lead anybody, really speaking. Everybody gets to flow with this beautiful energy that's right in this room, the caring love that's exhibited. And Ulf mentions about how we all have traumas, and it's so many different ways, and it affects us mostly through our experience in this body with the dis-ease. And what can we do about it? Ulf is one of these kind of experts. I first met him through Humanity Rising. And I'm going to let him tell the story of what he's doing in Africa and other places, just like we're doing so much through Zoom calls and so on, and spreading the peace and love, we get to be able to find out how to be able to integrate tools to release the stress that we have. The Peace Lab, however, is totally about removing the causes and exploring, experimenting, and finding the missing link, that one thing that will give us a quantum leap in being able to move through life in a graceful and thriving way. And without tools these days, we'd be so stressed out. Like seeing people shot at Saugus High School is not a nice thing. And dealing with the aftermath of the people's stresses, it causes so much in people. We've all carried stresses in our life, and it's now time we can release it. We will explore this whole issue of solutions and treatment, so to speak. So, Ulf, would you share your expertise?
Sure, absolutely. So, yeah, someone was writing trauma is when life causes us distress that we cannot, that is too big for us to hold alone. And my view of trauma is slightly different. I'm not disagreeing. You know, we all need the definitions we carry. We define the world through our experiences. But I've been working together with my colleague Gunilla Hamna, among other places, with what we try to find the most vulnerable populations that nobody is actually looking to protect in the moment. That's been our mission. So part of this is working at a center for liberated child soldiers in Congo, which is a place which is faring very badly from the world because of constant civil war, more or less, which is due to our cell phones, because we're allowing corporations to mine the grounds there to get minerals so that we can have a longer battery time. And we don't understand that child soldiers and sex slaves and rape and trafficking are all tied into our technology consumption. So we've been working there. We've been working with inmates in Rwanda. And this is another complex situation because there was a genocide in 1994. And that's traumatizing on so many levels because some people were told, you have to kill your neighbors or we will kill you. So that's like a triple, quadruple trauma with layers of shame and who am I and what does that mean? And often we forget that the perpetrator is often as traumatized as the survivor. So we've been to 14 prisons because if you let people out of there, you know, and they're not feeling safe in themselves and who they are, then you're going to have conflict again. We've also worked with war and conflict survivors, like from the 3 biggest wars in the world right now. There's 80 million displaced people and 800,000 suicides a year. And a lot of these people from the 3 big wars in Afghanistan and South Sudan and Syria, they passed through Turkey into Greece and then looked to get refuge in Europe. And Europe simply is convinced that we have no room for them. So we're traumatized by them coming here, and they're coming here because they're traumatized. So these are the crossroads of the value economics, because what is the economy we value most? The peace in our hearts, the peace when we go to bed and look into the ceiling or see ourselves in the mirror and say, I did what I could, or something else. So I'd like to share with you the actual methods we use, because we're very hands-on and we believe in what actually works. So as you see, I'm wagging a little bit to and fro, you know, like a flower in the wind, and I suggest you do the same. Because when we're traumatized, what happens is our mid-body goes stiff, because that's what the body does when it tenses, you know, like a deer in the headlight of a car saying, where should I go, right or left? Boom, too late. So when your body does things it would never do if you were chased by a saber-toothed tiger, then you are not becoming traumatized. You could also be releasing trauma at the memory of that. So this is something the body rarely does when it's chased by tigers. So you can put your hands together And you can just do a circular motion as if you had a glass pearl between them. As if you had a glass pearl between them that you're not trying to crush and you're not trying to drop. You're just maintaining a little bit of friction here. And then you close your eyes and you think of a dear friend. And this is the kind of friend that when you think about them, you smile because you can't help yourself. So it's the smile that you save for that specific friend. Now, if you don't have that friend, you can borrow somebody else's, you can have one of mine, or you can have, an imaginary friend. It doesn't really matter. It's about your smile. So smile as if you're thinking of the best friend you ever had. Dead or alive, fiction or fact, doesn't matter. It's hormones. So now you're doing a lot of different things here. You're smiling, you're wiggling, you're wagging, you're frictioning your hands. And you see what this does? It enhances the delta wave, the brain wave. That's the delta wave. Now, some would say, oh, but that's connected to deep sleep and meditation. And yeah, it is, but not only, it's always there. And brain waves, they're a symphony. The guy who plays the triangle or the girl who never gets to play, but except for in one spot, it goes bing, and it's perfect. Those are the brain waves. So delta are the ones that give you the foundation of peace in the body. And neurobiologically, they open calcineurin channels in your amygdala, which is your safety center, and actually diffuse the past memories that affect you. So what you can try if you have a good smile right now is you can connect ever so lightly to whatever stresses you in the future. And remember that whatever stresses you in the future or feels traumatic is a fantasy. And the good news is, if you're still thinking it, it hasn't happened yet. And when you realize that, you can think about whatever you think traumatizes you right now in this moment. It can't be much or you wouldn't be sitting here. So that's okay. And now you can go into the past. And there's, of course, some kind of memory in the past that might make you less smiley than you are right now. But if you keep your body going as you tap into that memory, I will promise you it won't affect you as much as it could have. And this is where we will tap into ancient rituals and energies and traditions. And I will ask Kurt, please, Kurt, as we do this, could you please just introduce the wonderful finger crossing, ancient shamanic, cutting the umbilical cord of trauma routine into this very moment, and then hand it back to me.
Okay, thank you very much, Wolf. After your presentation on Humanity Rising before, I talked with you, and it's magical being together. And this simple practice started when I was teaching at a inner city school with one of the biggest gangs in the whole town. And one boy had a practice of sucking his thumb. I was teaching PE, and he's sucking his thumb in a class of 70 kids. And I said, after class, I said, do you want to stop sucking your thumb? And so, of course, what happened? He said, yes. And I said, well, look at every time that you are going to be able to reach your thumb towards you, I'm going to go like this when I see you. And I said, that's going to signal you to mentally say, switch. And then I created a little bit more of an impetus. And so this switches your idea from sucking your thumb to, I no longer suck my thumb. You're taking command of your beingness. And then I gave another practice. And I said, take your hand this way and have your left hand facing you, right hand against it. Come on, everybody gets to participate. This is not a normal class. We are active in my classes. I am a PE teacher, remember? Okay. So we take the hand like this, and then we're going to reverse the idea. Let's say I'm so sad, to why am I so happy? And I use the word, why am I so happy? It's the opposite of what we wanted, but it's a question. So it's a question to the universe or God about why am I so happy? So the answer has to come to you, because in one of the world scriptures, it says, ask and ye shall receive. So when you ask and you seek, you'll find, and we're seeking peace in the Peace Lab. So He did this, and it reversed that. And it was exactly what he wanted to do. Then there was another practice. And what you do, taking your right hand at the base of your torso, in the center of your body, and you lift your right hand straight up over your head and out to the side, like forming a big D. So it lifts up, straight up, and you're saying, thank you, I love you. What are you thanking? You're thanking the consciousness inside you that said, I am taking control of this life. I'm creating a new life. According to most of the religions, we are a child of God. So we get to practice that. We get to create either good or bad, because he gives us free will, and we are taking our free will into effect with that conscious change. So you're thanking God, or you're thanking that inner self, or as Chip mentioned, or you're thanking that consciousness that reminds you you're changing, you're improving. We don't have to have violence and so on. And you're loving the new you. So you are different in that moment. Simple. And if anybody wants that particular description, I can send it to you in a PDF file. Just connect with me.
Brilliant.
Or you can connect up through the Peace Lab. You can come to the after chat. I can put it in the chat and you can draw it down. We are giving our life away for life to thrive. And thank you very much.
So I'm going to go just, I want Ulf to pick up from there. And I want Anne, because I know, Anne, you've got some stuff on this that we need to also hear. So Ulf, actually, before I go to Anne, I'm wondering, in terms of the way you describe fear, we can either run to something or away from something. So
Yeah.
that would be really
Yeah.
helpful.
I can do that really fast. So here's the deal. Whatever you believe is a limit, is a limit. Whatever you believe is an unlimit, is an unlimit. So you have to ask yourself what is possible, and then you have to ask yourself what is impossible. And depending on which one you actually choose, you have to ask yourself the double negation. What if it isn't? Right. So could I succeed with this? Could I drop this fear? What if I could? What if I couldn't? Once you've done that, you will be able to reach goals that you didn't think of. That's how the 4-minute mile, English mile by Roger Bannister was. Once he showed that you could run faster than people thought at the time, they would run faster. So here's the deal. You have a hypnotist inside your head, and it's there 24/7, even as you dream. And your inner hypnotist is going to be listening to everything you say. So if you say things in your head to yourself, make sure you say things you want to see when they are painted. So if you say, I have too little time, that's not a good painting. I'm too old. I'm too white. I'm too black. I'm too Jewish. I'm too Christian. I'm too Muslim. I'm too woman. I'm too strong. I'm too weak. None of those are good. Ask yourself what you want to see when it's painted. This is from an instruction to the Guardians of Peace in Bhutan. I did a lecture for them with my colleagues some weeks ago. So here's the deal. The 3 states of mind. The 3 basic states of mind that you will find yourself in, and this has everything to do with trauma. We are mammals. We are programmed. This is the reptilian brain. This is the amygdala. So either you have the lightened heart, which is where everything is playful and possible and love, or you have a toxic trance, which is a spiral of threat, or you have the actual alarm center of the brain protecting you, as in life or death. So in the play state of mind, it's games and competing for fun and socializing, and everything is possible. In the threat state of mind, you're stressed and reactive and irritated and looking to solve things, running away from things. Play, you run towards them. In play, you say, Mommy, Daddy, they're home. Let's go hug them. In threat, you go, Mom and Daddy's home. Let's hide under the bed. They'll find out we ate up all the sugar. And then you have the survival state of mind, which is your 3rd state of mind. In this case, it takes over the whole brain. It's called amygdala hijacking, and it's life or death. So what happens when play meets threat? Hi, do you want to play? No, I'm in a hurry. So the inner voice will listen to the state you're in, and it will have the words. The voice of threat is saying, I can't, I need to avoid, it's hard, it's difficult, it's impossible, I must, there are problems. But the voice of play says, yeah, sure, of course. That's a challenge. I shall or I shan't. I've never done this. I'll probably be great at it. And then there's the third voice, the voice of trauma, which enters when we believe we are about to lose something very important. That's what trauma is. We're about to lose our reputation, our standing in the flock, our wealth, a limb, pain, our state of mind, or our life. So when this happens, there is no voice at all because the language center of the brain, the Broca center, is not activated anymore. So just make sure that you have the optimal states. And for extreme sports, you need to be playful and stressed, but you don't need it life or death because that's not going to be a football game. That's going to be war. Is that what you intended, Leslie?
That's, man, you are so succinct and you are so hot. We liken this dialogue to a jazz, and that was a beautiful multifaceted musician play there. Amazing. I want to go to Anne and stay inside the concept of trauma, only because there's a couple more things I'm puzzling about in terms of this. And Anne, and all the work that you are doing in the compassion field, and you just spent the last 10 days in Texas in the most calamitous of situations. How do you observe it in others? And how do you stay in the place of holding the space for whatever is there to be experienced and honored?
Well, what I kept finding myself wanting to engage conversation with was the whole kind of undergirding of what we have found in terms of neuroscience and what happens to our bodies. That, and I would even suggest there's another place, that fight or flight, or that trauma actually informs us. It informs us about ourselves. It informs us about how we engage others and what's actually going on, not just in our mind, but in our bodies. So when we're in those situations of higher stress or threat even, our brains have this system and hormones that come out, cortisol, that helps us to not be more overwhelmed than we already are by it. I mean, the best way that I think about it is when our body goes into shock, when we're physically hurt. It's like we almost have cotton candy brain, or there's been a major death in your life, and people will even say further down the road, I hardly remember any of it. It was like I was there at the funeral, but I wasn't. So this brain chemical is happening to us. And this, by the way, is not my field. There are probably people out there who have neuroscience in their background. I'm a clergy person, but these things have given me so much understanding and hope to know that this chemical happens to all of us. And then what it does to us when we are in those states is that we don't think as clearly. We can't remember things as well. And to know that that not only is happening to others there in this place, but also to me. So even just that awareness can move you. And that's why these practices of meditation and the practices we've already seen this morning become so helpful. Because like a basketball player who's been practicing, then they get in the game and they know how to shoot without thinking about it and when to do it. That's why we do these kind of practices, so that when we know we're in that state, we can go back into the breathing or that meditative space, and we can call up another brain chemical that will counterbalance it, which is often called the love hormone or oxytocin. So we experienced already today several times oxytocin, whether we were aware of it or not. So when we had our first meditation, that was oxytocin. When we're swaying, we're producing oxytocin. When we're doing this, we're producing oxytocin. And we can do that in the middle of when our situation puts us at stress.
Beautiful. So I just, Kurt, you wanted to come in on
Actually,
that?
it's interesting because stress happens sometimes very quickly, like when somebody cuts you off on the freeway. And the very first thing that I do is a little crazy. I bless them instead of do something else. But the first thing to stop all that extra production of adrenaline because you want to fight them or fly after them or whatever is to stop the overproduction of adrenaline. And to do that, a simple little Tarzan kind of movement is thumping your thymus. Now, the thymus is one hand below your neck, and you put it in the center of your chest. And right below there, about 2 inches below, is where the thymus is. And that will regulate your glands back into normal. So immediately it stops it, because otherwise that overproduction, your body has to use up so much energy to be able to turn it back into something that really isn't good for you, the body at the time.
Yeah.
And it's a quick and simple practice. Again, if somebody wants to have some of that and the meditation practice, I got PDFs. It's also in a book, Winning Ways for Living, and so on and so forth. So
Fabulous.
yeah.
Fabulous. So I have a question to all of us here, and that is, it's one thing when we are experiencing trauma, but we are aware of us living in families where one or more members are inside of significant trauma, whether that be through the escalation of isolation through COVID, whether that be some form of brain illness that is struggling to find its way. And that then traumatizes the family in the sense that it's held as such a vibration that it's very much becomes fluid inside of that family unit. And I'm seeking insight into how do we, I mean, I know the intellectual side of this. Yes, you don't engage in the trauma. Yes, you hold space for this situation. Yes, you listen deeply into the situation. I think we all understand that. I'm curious about what does one do when this is on a sustained basis, when day in and day out, this is the experience that family has. How do we work inside of that family system so that we can release and move it in a way that is healing rather than perpetuating?
Can I answer?
Absolutely.
It's by recognizing that we're in a system, and that practices are key. Everything around us, including me, are systems. And so with that family, I'm going to step back a little bit. So to know things in our head, as I know these things, Leslie, you said that this, I know these things. But it needs to move, much as Ulf did, it needs to move into the body. And that's why practices become so important. You practice, 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 practice for when the basketball game happens. You practice, practice, practice. So when they cut you off in traffic, you bless them toward the greater good and take a breath instead of letting all the other stuff, shoot off inside of you, right? But the hardest thing for me in learning about compassion and trauma was recognizing that everything is a system and lives within a system, and start to view the world that way. And so when you're talking about a family, it is a system of independent parts that are either working together in unity or they're not. And then to be able to see that as a system, it's hard work. I mean, the hardest work that I've ever done as a system is on myself, because I don't necessarily want to look at everything. But you know, to even find small movements within the family system that could change everything. You know, if the family system just started to sway with the wind more readily and more often, and even just one person doing it without telling everybody else, but starts to model it, it can change the entire system, because we're all part of one system, and the energy impacts other energy as well. It speaks directly to, like, again, this is not my field, but neurogenesis, the place where I get some of my greatest hope, because we have these neural pathways that the strongest of which were formed as we were children and, you know, earlier in life. So those trauma moments that we keep replaying build a neural pathway. It's called neuroplasticity. And so there's like this sheath that is built, and it is built simply by repetition. So to keep going over and over and over the trauma, it builds this strong pathway.
Yeah.
But the good news that neuroscience has found is that we can build new pathways no matter how old we are, simply by repetition.
Okay. So, what's building on what Anne's just offered?
Well, I mean, I agree completely with that. And the thing is this, we're a system. I usually tell people through metaphor. So I say, imagine that we're all in the same swimming pool. And if it gets warmer, somebody peed. It doesn't really matter who it was. That's climate change for you, and that's family systems. It's impossible not to affect the system. And, you know, you could say that in neurolinguistic programming, there's a saying, you cannot not communicate. So being a silent bystander is applauding whatever is going on, no matter how bad it is. And we have to remember that. That's why things like Me Too, you know, a trauma that's been perpetuated forever, suddenly gets a spotlight. And it should actually be a he too and she too in that as well, because we need to, you know, pick it up and see where it's going from there, because those are the traumas. Now, if you have a family system or a corporate system or a national system or a country system or just a very small swimming pool with 3 people in it, you still need to realize, like exactly like Anne says, that we don't have a family. We do a family. We don't have a relationship. We do a relationship. Everything is Tao Te Ching. So Taoism in this is that we're doing, loving, making love, not having love. So if we want a family to change, we need to do something. And it's the action that changes everything, not the passivity.
So what is the intersection between trauma and compassion?
Becoming humble?
Becoming humble?
Yeah, becoming humble. Compassion is the antidote. So if we go back to fight or flight, there is another option, and that's engagement. How do we go about, you know, engaging and coming back then to, you know, those practices of that help us when we need them. I'm going to list really quick in the chat box some of those basic practices, and literally they're physical, practical things to do. And so that, I hope you can't hear that, but we have a fire alarm going off.
We can hear it.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, that's our trauma trigger. It's just saying, this is a fire alarm.
That was not planned, of course. Okay, there it went. But so the meditations and things that we're learning today, that calming of body and mind, our value system, to take time to figure out what are things that are most important to us, and stay in that mindfulness of it, and where our emotions are, caring for ourselves and our own compassion, our common humanity, the importance of forgiveness and gratitude, empathy and concern for others, how we're interdependent. This is crazy. And this is probably perfect timing, but engaging then those systems with discernment. And that's where community also becomes important. I love what's happening here with Humanity Rising, because what you're doing is creating community, not just for a good time or learning more, but for strengthening how to move forward within these systems that we've created. I was asked to talk about, a couple practical, some practices on compassion. And I want to go towards the route of a system so that we can start to look at our systems.
And just before you do,
Okay.
I want to just bring in David and Chip for a moment, just for a moment.
Good. Okay, good.
Because we definitely want to understand the system. Yesterday we talked about the intersection of race, culture, and activism. And just because we opened that intersection, we didn't close it. We kept it in play. And I want to understand that how when we speak about trauma, and even when we speak about compassion, it still is in a system, as you just to build on what you just said, Anne, that has other forms of triggers, of realities that different parts of the world are living in than we are. And David, you said the trauma was when you were born, and it was a skin condition. And I just want to know how have you worked at that intersection of trauma and compassion with that reality? A little question.
A little question. Okay, so in terms of racism, can we get, I don't like seeing just me. I had a very nice experience. I had a very nice experience where I had a lot of racism when I was young, because I was basically Portuguese parents, brown skin, in Scotland, who are white as snow. Okay. And I was the closest to a wog, paki, that was there. Chink. They didn't know what I was. It's just not white. And so I got a lot of racial abuse. And that was challenging, obviously, as a child. But here's the thing. I was walking down the road with my brother one summer after school, and he's like 8 years older. So I was about 10, maybe younger, 9. And I was telling him, well, it was a kind of tough day at school, abuse. And he said to me, he simply said this simple thing. He said, they don't mean it. They don't mean it. I was like, And at that moment, my awareness kind of like popped open just a little bit, as children becoming adults. And I said, okay, so I'm listening. And effectively he said, it's just their parents. Their parents are racist. Their parents are doing things and and the kids are just copying it. Yeah, okay. Now, that, for an individual who's like 8 or 9, you're like, wow, okay. So I think there's a similar thing going on regarding us as adults, regarding our systems. Okay, it's not a personal thing. Okay, the issues that are going on. It's a system that's causing people to do this. So I think that's fairly short answer to your question. Not the birth one, because that one's trickier.
Yeah, always. Chip, anything that you wish to bring in before we go into the practice that we're going to learn in terms of compassion?
Yeah, I similar to David, I experienced racism growing up. I remember the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. I was in 2nd grade, and my 2nd grade teacher asked us to write a few lines about why Negroes and Caucasians should try to get along. I raised my hand and asked, what is a Negro? What is a Caucasian? I had no concept. And that's when I learned that I call it the day I became a Negro, because I was raceless at that time. I had no sense of race. And racism was introduced to me, and I began to take note of, difference that, how people might treat me. And one of the things that has always gotten me is just walking into a space in my brown body, my brown male body, walking into a space and being surveilled just upon entry, or walking down the street. As a teenager walking down the street, I might have been enjoying the sound of birds singing in the trees, and a white woman at some distance approaching from the opposite direction would see me, clutch her purse, tense up, and maybe even cross the street just upon seeing me in the same space. And that really used to bother me. It's like, what that does to me, the person who feels that I am a threat, actually, that's an attack on my person. You know, what they're communicating to me is that I'm not welcome, that I am viewed as a threat. And it makes me question, like, what is it about me that is so fearful? What is it? And that is something that, like David, I think it was your brother who said this to you, the older brother. It's not them. While it is, if it's an adult doing that, you know, they could know better possibly, but there are precedents in history that just, you know, you have to forgive history in a certain respect in order just to live, in order just to have peace within yourself. And, you know, and then you deal constructively with racism and mindfully with it when it comes up, but you can't let it consume you. Otherwise, it's all consuming. It could be.
Yeah. So articulate. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to come back into you in terms of the system that you're going to take us into.
Well, I really too appreciate what David said, that the kind of shift of emotional awareness that happened to you. They, you know, they don't mean it, right? And there was just like this automatic shift. And if people haven't, you know, there's a lot of information out there and training and education. I'll put this in there as well, but on trauma-informed care. Hospitals and caregivers study it. You can Google and find out all sorts of things. But being even aware that we all experience trauma can not only help our own awareness, but it helps us then to interrelate with someone else. When David had that moment of aha, there was probably a really significant shift on how he viewed his peers, that they had been born into this cultural trauma, right? And had taken it on. But there was a shift that you could see them, David, once again, maybe as friends and peers. How can we get to that point? And so much of it, again, is being able to see things as a system. And so what I want to offer you is a quick look at system. And to do that, I'm going to use a light bulb. So with this light bulb, it in itself, internally, and this is a really good light bulb for it too, because it's clear glass, right? We can see the system within it, all those filaments and things. And we could all agree here real quickly that it provides light when it's plugged into energy. It has this purpose. That's what a light bulb does. Now, if we were to look at this more as a bigger system, we would start to think about who made it and every part of it. Where did the materials come to make the glass? Probably not where the metal came from somewhere else. And all the people that went into getting the metal where it needed to be, where the glass needed to be, where it went into a factory, and it all became this particular light bulb, right? We start to break down that system that brought it into being. And then there's another whole system that moved it out to get it into my hand, right? So how was that shipped? Who did that? Was that done by truck or train or airplane, or, you know, and who stocked the shelf in the store where I bought it? And you know, that whole, it's a system. How many people's lives were impacted, touched by this one light bulb that has a common recognized purpose of providing light, right? So we have, across the years, and probably more recently, we've seen changes in light bulbs and how they look, right? And how they are produced. It's because people were looking carefully at how they were produced. Does it impact the environmental system? Is there a way that we can make this light bulb so it impacts the environment less and has greater care for our environment, even in the shipping process? So then we can start to look at, you know, our light bulbs also look different depending on, you know, like what their purpose is, right? But they're all part of a system. And so taking that, and part of compassion is like being able to look at the system almost like a map. And so if we were to spend time with our light bulb, I would be doing some mapping of where it was shipped from and how many people it impacts, and how we might take one small movement to make it, again, maybe more environmentally kind and contributing to the greater good. What little shift might that be, right? But always recognizing that even in little shifts, change can cause harm. In a little shift in changing the light bulb, an expertise that one person might have provided now is no longer needed. So things happen in the shift. There might be a greater good, but somebody might be unemployed now. And so the process of compassion is always looking towards the greater good, and at the same time recognizing where the hurt might be and shift there as well. So that's like a big scale. We could look at the system like the entire healthcare system in the United States. There's a conversation, right? There's a lot of engagement of discernment and how can we make this shift that's needed. But to even look at ourselves, so this is me, you know, I'm a little light bulb. I have purpose and contribution into the world, but to be able to even look at my system of what I was born into. So that comes back to David and those parents, and even the children were born into that. I mean, I could be born anywhere on the planet with the same DNA, but I would not be this person I am here, because the system I was born into also helped to create me. But I can look at my system and even the trauma in it, and how does it inform me? How can I choose to repeat things to create stronger neural pathways of choice of who I wish to be, my ethical mindfulness of who I wish and choose to be in the world? And how can I change that? Recognizing that I will also have to probably let go of some things that I don't want to let go of because they have become comfortable, even though they might be toxic to me.
Yeah.
I have to let go. Or within my family system, there might be some truths and honesty. This comes back to the larger even conversation on racism. There's a lot of stuff that we got to, like, fess up to and almost vomit forth. And that's not going to be fun. But
It's not going to be fun, but it's part of the
right.
part of the healing that we're navigating. And I think clearly in what you're just saying, Anne, and what I've heard from Chip and David and Kurt is that there's a search for meaning inside of all of this, our own search for meaning. And if you put into the chat that, Viktor Frankl's work on search for meaning is a powerful piece.
Right.
So Ulf, I'm just wondering, can you just speak to how we in this intersection of compassion, trauma, and economics look into our search for meaning?
Well, I'd be happy to do that. You see, I've walked down that road that Chip describes, and I've walked down the road of David as well. I mean, growing up in 7 different countries mean I get 7 different perspectives. I change. In one place, I am the person being fearful. In the other place, I'm the person being feared, and it has nothing to do with me. It's the system I'm in. So I think we need to remember this. In the intersection where trauma needs to meet compassion, we need to say to ourselves that we have no idea what war the person we meet has been through or is fighting inside themselves. Compassion is recognizing anything that is harmful as a fear from that person. So if I see a person who changes to the other side of the street because of me, the way they see me, it's because of their fear of me. It's their trauma that is causing them to cross the street, not me. It's their trauma. And if I choose to be compassionate about it, I will say, that is not about me. It's their fear. What can I do to change that fear? Can I do something right now? Or does it need to happen in their home or when they're brought up? Or, does it need to happen by people near them talking about it to understand it? So I'm saying I don't make a difference between racism or Me Too or fascism or any ism you find out there. They're all based in one simple root: fear. Fear of me not being safe, me not getting what I should have or might be entitled to or believe I'm entitled to. And sometimes maybe I'm not, So if we get rid of fear, then we get rid of all of that. And if we understand with compassion that it's all about other people's fear, because Homeboy Industries in LA, we worked with them. They say, hurt people, and nothing stops a bullet like a job. Right. So there you go.
I work with Homeboy, actually.
Love Homeboy. Hector Verdugo. Give him my best.
Yeah.
Hey, the Father Boyle is really great too.
Fantastic.
Dynamite, yeah.
We collaborate. Our school collaborates with them directly.
Oh, they're great. I mean, next time you need Hector, say hi from Ulf from Sweden. He will laugh.
But see,
I'd like to add something to that,
system.
if I may, to what you just said.
Okay.
I had a couple instances, one just 2 days ago, where I was ordering food, and the way the young white man behind the counter responded to me, he just looked at me and kind of gruffly and dismissively said, "You have a question?" And I said to myself, I'm conditioned to I have this conditioning that says, I'm often not welcome. Sometimes I find myself unwelcome because of my color. And so I said, does this guy look at me and not see a customer? I'm here to do business with him, and this is the way he greets me. And I said, yes, I'd like to order food. And he said, well, you order food over there at the cashier. So I went to the cashier took my order, and I said, I'd like to sit at the counter. And she said, well, no, this is the to-go. And I said, well, I was over there, and he told me to come here. And this whole confusion. And I'm thinking, in my head, this guy sees me as a Black man, and he wasn't very welcoming to me. I get my order, I sit down at the counter, and then he strikes up a conversation with me. He's actually very friendly, and he's Algerian, and he thought that I was possibly Tunisian. So there was this kind of common ground that he thought that I had some cultural connection to him, when I'm thinking he thinks I'm something else. I had a similar experience in an Uber, where I got into the car, and the driver was just I thought he was glaring at me in the back seat, and he said a couple of things to me that I couldn't understand. And I said, excuse me, can you repeat that? And finally, he said, aren't you Arabic? I'm from Syria. I thought you were also from Syria. He was speaking to me in Arabic, and which is why I didn't understand him. And I thought he was looking at me because he was uncomfortable with me in his car. But the truth was, he was making a connection, you know? So our own conditioning also, we have to pay very close attention to how we are conditioned to respond to situations.
But you know
Yeah.
what? There's a great teacher in India. He was the teacher of Rama. And his big quote is, the world is as you see it. And we see it either like mentioning about, you mentioned Chip in the chat, about having your rose-colored glasses on or having those other kind of glasses on.
I think that glasses are a privilege. And I think that understanding that they are is something that's part of this conversation this week. So I want to just link into, we have a couple more things to do here, and I'm watching the time. I love the way when we started this conversation a couple of weeks ago, and David said, well, the original trauma was the introduction of money. And I want to bring in the intersection of the economy. So David, you remember that wonderful sort of moment you had where it was the original trauma is when we decided to have money as a form of exchange?
I would like to talk about that, but I just want to say, just for a moment, that most of what we're doing and talking here is on the kind of positive side.
Yeah.
But we do know that we're talking about things that we all experience. And I'm aware when I'm listening that there are aspects of systems which you've kind of gently talked about that are really problematic to us all. Okay, so we will talk about money in a moment. But I just wanted to say that when I engage people, I get a little bit stressed. And that could be a really good thing. I enjoyed generally engaging young people. But with adults, it's a little bit trickier because of the mentality, what people have in their heads. But really what I'm trying to say is that there are people listening, okay, that are suffering, and we are suffering. And so one of the things that I suffer from is that, for example, I don't really have a great relationship with my brother. And that's because he keeps on doing something. Kurt kind of just linked to it a little bit, touched on it. But he keeps on doing something with me, and it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm old now, you know, okay? There are older people here, but why is it over 20, 30, 40 years, still that beautiful thing that he offered me, you know, when he was 16, he was only 16 when he popped my brain open. Beautiful thing that he did for me, and I respect him a huge amount, but he does things, okay, which prevent us from becoming we, okay? And there's something happening in how we're communicating, which is preventing us from becoming we, okay? Or, as there are some people here as well, there are things that make us more we, okay? And so I don't know if you want me to continue talking about the economics, but there is something about we-ness here, which I really would like to experience. And I think that's the whole point about the week.
Yes.
Is that whatever it is that we're doing psychologically and various techniques that we have individually, it's about us, okay, we. And it's not just the talkers, it's obviously the listeners. In fact, it's everybody, okay? And so I don't know if you want me to carry on and talk about the economics.
I want to, before you do go on, is there any response to what David has said in terms of that dynamic inside that family, inside his family, and how?
My spontaneous response is that whatever he's doing should be seen through his glasses. I mean, the only way you can find out why he keeps doing that is to find out why he's doing that. And that's the answer, because even though you perceive it as something stopping the we-ness, he might be doing exactly what he believes is the door opener for we-ness. You just have two different doorways and they're not aligning. It's like a subway station, not stopping in front of where people are waiting. So I would just explore that. And that would be my response to that. And when it comes to the value economics, I would say that value economics for me is when we reevaluate what economics actually are, because I do agree that the moment that we introduce money, we have a shitload of problems. And Aristotle knew that. He wrote books about it 2,000 years ago. But we still do need economics because we can't run around with cows to trade for boots all the time. It's going to be heavy and messy and smelly. So value economics for me is when we start valuing quality of life over success, quality of every individual's right to a life. And I think there are two simple rules. If everybody takes full responsibility for themselves and everybody takes responsibility to find what gives their life meaning and does so without intruding on anybody else's possibility to find their meaning, and no more than that, I think we could have a pretty good paradise going on here.
I think it's also interesting that David has brought up a life situation with your brother along with economics, because the root of economics is household. It is your household, right? And the thing with compassion, when you're looking at something as a system, at my best, the only thing in a system that I might possibly be able to change is me. And that's even difficult. So when somebody else is doing something that makes me crazy, yes, I could ask them what that's all about, but that might still not change the dynamic. I also have to look at me in the system. And what is one small shift I can make in changing that dynamic with my sibling? That's economics. How do I shift my life investment in my household, in relationship, to change it into something more valuable? I could go to my brother. Actually, I would go to my sister, because I have that story too, but it's with my sister. And I could ask her, what's up with that? And she may never talk to me again. That's a risk. But what am I doing or not doing with my sister that keeps that agitation going? Do I see her at the same value level as myself, my common humanity? Can I be impartial to whatever that is, enough so that I can see her full value somehow? What could I do to raise the love hormone between us, the oxytocin? Can I forgive this something that she does and be grateful just for who she is? What do I have to do to change that economy? I want to hear about economy, David.
So I want to just, as I link into David, one of the things that in my role as an economist is that we shifted the notion of not the currency of value. And we said 30 years ago that the currency of value would be, in the next 20 years, relationships. So in terms of, that's the currency that we will invest in and grow with, as opposed to the GDP and the other forms in which we operate. And so, David, you have done a really marvelous job in building a project, an experiment that helps us understand relationship and how we grow social experience in those relationships as we bring people into things that excite us.
It's another attempt. You're making another attempt, another beautiful attempt to introduce me and the economic, but I'm still not. I'm a bit worried. I'm going to interrupt Leslie with this, but look, one of the people listening here is a good friend of mine, Wendy, and we danced tango. I met her on the dance floor. And what happens if you're doing Argentine tango, certainly the way that I do it, is that when you have a partner in your arms, there is both right at the beginning, a complete and utter desire to be together. Okay, there's a weeness, and you can feel it in the breath. Okay, you can feel it in the breath. Okay, both breathing, being together, standing. And then the music starts, and you're like, oh, this is quite nice. And then you move. And within a step, a gap occurs. Now, where did this gap come from? Is it from me, or is it from the other person? And I spend most of my tango practice chasing after the other person because they've got an idea of what I'm doing. Not following the experience, they're following an idea and breaking we. And so I spend quite a lot of time just trying to follow the follower. Then I have to go, oh, okay, right. Because it just gets confusing. But when, and here's the trick, when the follower follows the leader and the leader follows the follower, it becomes a union. And that can be maintained through time. There's something happening here, how we are discussing things, which separates the talker from the listener. Okay, there's something going on. So I am going to talk about the economic. There is something fundamental, okay, about how we are operating with money. And I think it goes back to 3,000 years ago with the formation of money, with the first coins that were struck in Phrygia, okay, in the Middle East. Money was a thing. We still treat it as a thing, even though it's a number on a computer somewhere, on a phone and some computer somewhere or other. We still treat this number as a thing, and we transact it with things. So, for example, this pen, I literally bought this pen. I paid the money for this pen. That is an illusion. Okay, it's a very powerful illusion, and it's a very effective illusion because that's what our entire economics is based on. We're treating money as a thing, and we can exchange it. Every culture that has ever engaged, okay, the West, or in fact civilized societies, in the Far East, they came up with money too, has wondered, why are we operating so differently? Why is the Western or the civilized person operating so differently? Happened in North America. We made peace with them. We were, the nice people, nice white people went over and go, hello. And there were lots of nice white people. And the Indians went, oh, wow, you're different, but wow, nice people. But there was something happening with the economics, is my suggestion, that deformed the relationship. So the thing about giving in a gift-giving society interface with our society, which is based on exchange and money. So the fundamental aspect of this thing about buying and selling induces a psychic tension between us, okay, which has been happening for 3,000 years. Okay, so, and I think that is the primary number game that we're playing that is causing most of our disorder. Now, if this is the case, can we change it? And if we do change it, can we recognize it and then start trying to use it? Because it will run contrary to absolutely everything that is going on, that is informing us about systems, about who we are and how we operate and all this kind of. So it's beautiful what is being suggested here, but there are things going on in the world, systems beyond our control that are really, we know, destroying. Okay, really destructive. And however powerful we might be as an individual, okay, and how aware we are, if we're still operating these tools that have this effect on people that causes the level of destruction that, for example, Ulf has talked about. We're talking about the hotspots, people really suffering at this moment. Okay, and also aware of it. He's very calm and capable of it. I'm not. I play this funny space that I go, I don't know, I'm not as good as many people here. I cannot I cannot separate myself, okay, from that suffering. So I have to keep it away, both. I have to go, I know it is happening, okay? I know it is happening, but we have to change the very basic processes that we're operating in. So with that, just want to say that there is a way of changing this economic. And what we do with, well, call it scale, that's the current app that we use, is we change money from a thing to a vector. Mathematically, it is fundamentally different. And it means, and here's the consequence of it, if you treat money as a vector, as a direction, and instead of trying to simulate our current economy, which is what the physicists have done, the simple question is, if we have a system to treat money as a vector, what's its most natural function? And this is what it sounds like. I have a pen, I have some money, Leslie needs the pen, I give her the pen, and I give her the money.
Well, that's, you know what? That is an incredible introduction to coming to the after chat to find out how to play with scale. I just want to, before we go, David, on this, I'd just like to take a breath in honoring the dissonance that you're speaking into. That dissonance lives around the world in us. Thank you, David, for that.
A very small positive thing is that just earlier today, I went onto the YouTube to find Ulf, and I saw his video about this process. And what I did was I created a card on scale, and I shared it with Leslie and Kurt. Okay, I basically gave them some money. Okay, I don't know if they've accepted it yet. I haven't checked, actually. I should have checked, but I haven't checked. But we'll check afterwards. Okay, and find out, well, what are you going to do, Leslie and Kurt? You receive this gift and you receive money. I think I give you £1. Okay, are you going to, yeah, a lot of money. Are you going to share it forwards? And if you do share it forwards, that £1 goes forwards. Your video goes forwards to a friend of Leslie's. Oh, yeah. But if you think it's valuable enough, right, Leslie, you add your own pound, like the equivalent of buying, but instead of giving it to Ulf, you give it to another person. That's it. That's it. Now, what we're going to do is if with this video and other videos and various things that are happening with the Peace Lab, is if you think a video is good, share it with a friend and put money into it. And that is going to change the world. Okay, that simple little process, potentially. And if we do that this week, we might see a result by Friday. We might not see a result by Friday, but we might. So it's a positive action that we can conduct.
So David, you're going to be in the after chat to get into a breakout so that we can learn how to play scale. And thank you for such a great offering and such a great gift. And I also want to invite Ulf into the gift that you're also providing. Talk about a gifting economy. Woo!
Yeah, gifting economy. Yeah. Well, the thing is that we've been sitting down, me and my hypno homies, main hypno homie Frederick, and we've been talking 5 years now. What is that actually makes people tick? Because if we want change in the world, we need everybody to be responsible. For everybody to be responsible, people need to know who they are. They need to know their values. If your values aren't clear, you cannot be responsible even to yourself. So we looked at what is the absolutely shortest road to find your values and define your morals and to find out what you actually believe that you know. And before I say anything else, I want to say I love the model, David. Our motto is pay it forward. You know, that is everything. So love it. We'll look into it. But I want to throw this into there. So we managed to boil down the insights of sharing and looking into a couple of thousand clients. What is it that made them tick and not tick and untick and tick? It's actually something that we can teach in 4 hours. So we set together this training, which is called Leadership Redefined, which allows you to understand and redefine what you believe, what your values are, your attitude, and at the end, what that leads to in action. An action like using Squale, an action like paying something forward, an action like opening the door, to find out what somebody feels about something. And we want to offer it to everybody here for free because we believe in paying it forward. So after hearing David, we should have offered money too, but what the heck, we'll offer at least the training. So here you are. What you do is you go into this link and you click in scholarship. So anybody from Humanity Rising has a free scholarship to join this training. You will do 1 hour one day, 1 hour the second day. Then you will have 8 days where you spend 5 minutes a day doing an exercise, 5 minutes a day. If you can spare that to redefine your whole view of the world. And I will assure you, this is not for the weak stomach or weak-minded, because it is disconcerting to find out how little we actually know. And it's very calming to be calm in the unknowledge of things.
Thank you so deeply for that and for everything that you are giving to this world. And I know that, Anne, you had something you were asking people to join you in the chat. What are you welcoming us into?
Well, there's extraordinary compassion, integrity training. This all just fits so well together about discovering your values and then practicing that through mindfulness. So it's called Compassion Integrity Training, but we're doing a round of it in San Antonio. And I just thought it would be fun to invite people to join me there. It's virtual, but come to San Antonio. And it starts on the International Golden Rule Day. It just seems like it all fits with what we're doing today. So, the benefits package for doing this kind of work is that you get to meet extraordinary people and spend more time with them. So I invite you. It's a sliding compassionate scale, so you can pay $0 and become a part of it. So has back to that economy, paying it forward, come and invest your life with me. I would just like to spend time with all of you. So.
Well, we could hang for a long time, but I'm sure that there's a tick-tock on this program that we need to bring it to a close. I would just want to say with the deepest of gratitude as I look into your eyes, Ulf, and say thank you.
Thank you.
Anne, thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Chip, thank you. David, thank you. Kurt, thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you all for being here and knowing that we are the change and we change and all is changed. Om Takwiasan, all our relations.
And now Chip is going to close out our circle. And we thank you so much for opening us and closing us, Chip. And when Chip is over, we're just going to spend a couple of minutes with Jim, Kurt, and I just finishing up the Peace Week discussion. Over to you, Chip.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about a Huna Hawaiian practice, which was mentioned in the chat earlier and was touched on in various ways throughout the morning. a practice called Ho'oponopono. And there are 4 statements. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Many of us talked about incidents, situations, David and his older brother, different conflicts that we have in our families, perhaps at work. And certainly there's a lot of conflict going on in the world. And we come up against people. I gave examples myself of things that happened. And Ho'oponopono is a practice of forgiveness. And it's quite something, because Johns Hopkins University has done research on forgiveness and its effects on health. And the more we age, the more important forgiveness becomes, and the greater the implications are for our health. When we forgive, we have better health. When we don't forgive, when we hold on to things, our health is not so great. So Ho'oponopono assumes a radically different way of looking at the world. In the Western perspective, we're kind of like meat puppets with consciousness lodged in the brain and radiating out of our eyes and ears and whatnot. And we are objects among different objects in the world. Ho'oponopono assumes that our world is our own creation. Our consciousness actually holds the world. Our space of consciousness is where we experience the world, and everything that happens in that world, we have some responsibility for. We talked about responsibility earlier. And while it may not be rational or logical to the Western mind, when we come up against a challenging situation, when we have a problem with another person, we can take responsibility for the situation simply by forgiving, asking for forgiveness. I'm sorry. This is my world. This conflict has come up in my world. This trauma is occurring in my world. This unfortunate situation is happening in my space of consciousness. So I'm taking responsibility by saying, I'm sorry that this is the way you feel. I'm sorry this is what's happening. Please forgive me for having this life space where this is happening. Thank you for forgiving me, and I love you. All this happens within oneself. It's a quiet repetition that goes on within, and it's amazing how there's a shift that happens. And you can look into the history of this. You can go online and look up Ho'oponopono. I'll put the name in the chat. It's an amazing process where mental health patients in an asylum were cured because one of the therapists just looked at their charts and practiced this. I love you. Forgive me. I love you. I'm sorry. And every patient in that ward was eventually released from this practice. And the effect on oneself is really great. So I would like to invite you just to think of someone in your life, think of a situation in your life, a person, hold them in your mind's eye, and just say to them, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Making this a practice, you'll find that there's sort of a shift in your own heart as you interact with others. Thank you very much.
Chip. Come on in, Jim. There we are.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Kurt, Chip, Anne, Ulf, everyone. This has been a very profound and inspirational session. I think the one bit that struck me the most, Chip, was your story of getting into taxi cab and feeling one way when the driver was actually feeling the complete opposite. And I wanted to just underscore that because, you know, in the end, if you think about it, peace, like almost everything in the world, is a matter of perception. It's an invisible way of viewing reality in the deep interiority of our own psyches. Very seldom is it objective. And so I've just relished that very poignant example of how fluid our perceptions and our notions of peace in relationship to specific individuals and the conditions within which we find ourselves. And Chip, you're right. Given all that complexity, the best way to move forward is say, listen, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well,
I love
Jim,
you.
the Canadians build our reputation on the word "I'm sorry." You know, somebody bumps into us and we say, "Oh, I'm sorry." I mean, it's culturally built into us. Just before we go, Jim, I just want to bring in Catherine, who has been minding the chat, and she's been doing a great job just keeping pace with us, and she is with us every day, keeping pace with us, and we'll be hosting the after chat when we move. Catherine, just in a word, what struck you in terms of what was emerging from the chat?
I think the sense of responsibility and what that looks like for different people, how we're taking responsibility for building the world that we want to have.
Wow, you're so good at this. You can read all that chat and you can come up with something so insanely salient and powerful. Thank you. So I'm just going to ask that Stanley put into our chat the link so that all of us can join you there. And so Jim, this has been kind of the intersection. We've done 2 so far, where we wanted to go inside of what happens when we bring these 3 elements together and what do we discover. And so tomorrow we're going to be doing the intersection of belief, the arts, and transformation. And so we are welcoming everyone to continue on the path of intersections. Come to the chat and be part of the scale experiment, because we want to show on Friday, when the Humanity Rising community gets involved in an experiment, magic happens. And so definitely, and just to let everyone know that Hugo of 7 Vortexes is tracking this entire week. And so on Friday, we get to see the biomimicry ecosystem of the peace conversation as it has unfolded on this platform.
You can all join this peace lab. It's a peace laboratory and it's a peace labyrinth. So welcome to the force that's changing the world, because we are the force. Omatokriasan, all our relations.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again here on Humanity Rising, same time, same station, 5:00 p.m. Central European time. See you all tomorrow. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Shalom.